You're fed up with the 9 to 5. You've been working hard for years and you're just not seeing the results you want. You want to break free from the traditional career but don't know how. Business Breaks is here to help. Hello everyone, this is Business Breaks and I am your host Dante Healy. My very special guest today is John Ladaga, CEO of Sturppy, a new and innovative financial modeling software dedicated for startups, which enables them to create robust financial models and scenarios without using Excel. Crazy, I know. It's been called a CFO in a box as it creates investor-ready dashboards and business plans, as well as having a comprehensive library of financial concepts to support the absolute beginner towards building a financial model for their business. Now, as a former accountant and Excel jockey myself, who built annual budgets as well as 3 to 5 year forecasts, I can tell you this is a great tool for small companies who are looking for something that can support the creation of financial models for your business without the need to understand complicated Excel formulas and functions. And so I am super excited for this interview. John, welcome to Business Breaks.
I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear you, man. That was a good intro. We're going to have to see if we can't hire you to do some marketing for us. I appreciate the overview. You did a good job.
Oh, consider me a fan, John. So please, in terms of you as a person, tell me about your career. So how did you develop from being a sales and marketing consultant, then digital consultant, to becoming the founder of a financial modeling software company?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I did my undergraduate degree in business at Auburn University. And while I was there, I studied, I was in the School of Business and my major was marketing, but I was part of this new minor program and it was called Business Engineering Technologies. And it was a cool program because it took teams from the engineering school and the business school, put us together in the same room and kind of forced us to work together and collaborate new kind of business ventures. And so that was kind of like my first taste of working with the engineers and working with technology. So I knew that I wanted to be in technology, but more so on the business side. So out of school, I actually worked for IBM for a short stint on the sales side. And then I turned kind of page and went the consulting route. So I worked for Accenture for about 5 years. And what I really enjoyed as a consultant was the problem solving. So I always enjoyed getting to work with new clients and solving new problems. And then eventually it just kind of hit me. I was kind of 5 years on the road, living in hotels every week. And I kind of just decided, do I really want to be a road warrior for every week for my career? And I decided to kind of take the leap in early 2019 into entrepreneurship and decided, what, I'm tired of kind of solving problems for other folks. I want to build my own business and jump in and give my go at entrepreneurship. So that led me to kind of start my first company. We got some venture backing from Comcast and a few others. That project ultimately kind of came to a bit of a crash. And one of the reasons was that we had poor financial projections and tracking. So we weren't tight with our budgets. We didn't have a clear path towards monetization. And when I kind of turned towards my peers, I saw a lot of them struggling with the same exact reasons. And so I was lucky at the time when my business was kind of coming to an end. I was able to meet my now current co-founder, Filippo. And Filippo had just started Sturppy. So I was pretty quick to jump on board with him and joined him as his co-founder. And that was in kind of middle of 2021. So we're about 18 months old now. And yeah, things are good.
Amazing. You just answered my next question. So I'll move on. So Sturppy was created to enable startup founders to have robust financial models without needing to master Excel. I guess from your perspective, besides obviously what you explained, what is the core problem it solves, and would it replace needing a CFO, especially if you're a small to medium-sized business, do you think?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two types of people in this world. There's the folks that love Excel and the folks that hate Excel. So Excel is a great tool. It's super robust. It's an open canvas, but it's not necessarily designed for one particular use case or thing. So the amount of Excel spreadsheets that I've seen for financial models, I've seen hundreds or if not thousands of them by now, and they all kind of have dozens of tabs, interconnected cells, and they just become kind of a mess to manage and to create. And then once you create something, you get cells breaking and it just gets messy. So what we decided was, as an early stage founder, whether you're a small business with a mom and pop shop or you're kind of going the tech route with a startup, you need to have a good sense of your financial modeling and kind of where your money is going and have that path towards profitability. And so we wanted to provide those founders that are busy building their startups with an easy way to get going and get going fast. And so that's kind of our attempt with Sturppy. So no Excel or kind of experience in the finance world is needed to kind of use our software and get started building investor-ready models pretty quick.
Brilliant. And then what are the biggest challenges you faced when finding a design that balances the need for discipline along with speed and flexibility when you're building out a tool that will deliver that robust financial model?
Yeah. So when you look at some of kind of the competitor financial modeling tools out there today, a lot of them are kind of more so focused around building financial models for SaaS companies specifically, so software as a service businesses. And one of the things that we wanted to set out to do a little bit differently was be kind of more of a horizontal platform. So allow the folks that are building a hair salon or a dog walking business to be able to build a financial model on Sturppy. So we kind of take this approach of we try to get kind of our customers 90% of the way there through a bit of a templated component approach. But then everything in Sturppy can be kind of fine-tuned and tweaked and customized. So we have this really robust system kind of behind the scenes that you can only find if you're looking for it. And it's called kind of our node system. And so nodes, we think about nodes as kind of building blocks or Legos. And we combine these nodes in different ways to create basically what we call flows. And flows are essentially these templates that you can use to model a particular revenue stream, like an e-commerce business or a SaaS business or a consulting business. And you can kind of pick and choose and put those pieces together to build your truly unique model. So it's been a challenge for sure to think about how do we build something that's robust and flexible, yet targeted enough to the average user? And we kind of try to achieve that with this approach of like a 90-10 approach, where 90% of things are kind of templated, but then if you want to go that extra 10%, you have the flexibility through our node editor to be able to tweak things and fine tune it to meet your specific needs.
Brilliant. And then as a big proponent of technology to solve real world problems, what do you see are the potential pitfalls when challenging the status quo with financial modeling being done today entirely in Excel, with the exception of, say, those large-scale enterprises who can afford to invest in an EPM, CPM, massive and very expensive platform?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just one big use case for our software is that folks end up building financial models on Sturppy, and then they share these models with potential investors. And you still get some old school investors that are used to their old ways of they want to see that Excel model. So we tried to, for the longest time, to not have an export to Excel or spreadsheet function, but we ended up caving and allowed that functionality. So you can take everything in Excel or everything in Sturppy rather and click one button and export the entire thing to Excel. So yeah, I think that Sturppy is lightweight enough where an early business can start using using it. It's comparable in price to some of the templates that you might find out there for Excel. And then you have the ultimate flexibility of if you are sharing this with an investor and he wants to see an Excel model or she wants to see an Excel model, you can click one button, export everything in Sturppy to a spreadsheet and get that funding check secured by giving them the Excel that they want. So it's tricky. I think we'll never truly, if you're kind of a hardcore Excel user, Sturppy probably isn't the solution for you. And kind of one of the analogies that I like to make is kind of between Photoshop, the photo editing software, and Canva. And so I'm a long time Photoshop user on the creative side. So building logos and graphics, I love Adobe's suite of tools, but it's a pretty masterful set of tools. And I spent hours and hours on YouTube learning how to use this set of tools. And when I first saw Canva, I looked at Canva, which is kind of a simpler Photoshop for dummies, if you will. And I was like, oh man, I'm never going to use that. And what I've kind of realized is that I'm not their target customer. I'm never going to be a Canva user, but I'm not like the majority of the market, right? So I think the world, it can coexist where there's kind of the Excel folks that want to stay in Excel. Great, more power to you. But we're kind of serving a different market of folks that are looking for something a little bit more collaborative, a little bit more easy on the eyes and not as formula driven from Excel perspective.
Thank you, John. I have a little joke as a project manager on finance projects that the default thing you need on the business requirements is the export to Excel. So I understand that pain of trying to get away from that.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, for sure. So we make it easy. I almost wanted, I joked with my co-founder, and we were kind of fighting back and forth on the export to Excel. And I was like, I almost wanted to, when you click that export button, like a pop-up comes up and it's like, okay, boomer. And then you can export to Excel or something like that. But no, we just allowed it to get into the platform. So, but it kind of would have been funny, I thought, to kind of get a little jab at Excel for us.
But Excel's never going away. That's why it's still around. But yeah, I don't use Excel for financial models myself. Oh, well, obviously with Sturppy. But I mean, do you see any signs of potential abuses by unscrupulous founders who might want to tweak their forecasts in order to inflate their financial projections? Or have you seen that sort of thing?
Yeah, right. I mean, it happens, right? And I don't think it's necessarily malicious. I think sometimes I think it's overly ambitious, maybe, or when folks are thinking that you kind of hear these stories and we watch movies and we see these startups that go from one user in month 1 to 1 million users in month 3, or we look at the TikToks and the Facebooks and see that explosive growth and think that we can easily kind of emulate that with our own startups. And the truth is, it's not really that realistic. So we try to do a couple of things within our tool to kind of nudge founders and keep them within the lanes of what's realistic. And we do that in a couple of ways. One is we provide a set of guidelines. So if you are building a new model and let's just say you're kind of tweaking something like a churn rate so if it's a SaaS business, a certain percentage of your customers are going to churn each month. And kind of the naive founder might say, well, our software is awesome. No one ever is going to cancel their subscription. We want 0% churn for our product, or we want 1%. Well, we provide kind of a nice little guideline at the bottom. A little banner kind of pops up that says the average company is probably somewhere in kind of like a 7 to 10% churn rate. So like that 1%, yeah, it can be aspirational, but it's probably not so achievable. So we try to kind of keep founders kind of within the lanes there and try to be kind of more of an educational resource, because a lot of folks just don't know that the models that they're building are a little bit over ambitious, if we'll call it. So, but it'll always happen. And I think if these founders are going on and trying to kind of raise funds from venture capitalists. They're used to seeing things like that, and they kind of get weeded out, if you will. But our goal is to kind of get these founders that are building models on Sturppy, when they do step in front of a VC or an angel investor, that they don't look like they're overly ambitious. So we our goal is kind of to make them, or kind of guide them to create models that are founded in sanity and reality, if you will. So we do our best there, but it's always going to happen, of course.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's mostly those big mistakes are more from naivety than actual intent, shall we say.
Yeah, exactly right. Like I see an occasional model and it's year one, $0 in revenue, year two, $500 million in recurring revenue, and I'm like, yeah, that's going to be tough. I mean, you could do it maybe, but let's bring it back to planet Earth a little bit here. So we try to be kind of that educational resource too, specifically because we deal with so many early stage founders that they might not know what some of these financial terms are. They might not know the difference between a convertible note and a priced round. And so throughout the platform, we also bake in a lot of educational resources to try to kind of inform and educate these founders around the ins and outs of finance and raising money, et cetera.
And that's so important because, as you say, you said earlier that one of the biggest things with a business is controlling your finances. That's probably the biggest cause of so many startups failing.
Yeah, I think if you Google it, it's like top reason number one startups fail, I believe, is basically running out of funding. And so yeah, staying on top of it's important. It's something that everybody needs to do. And the other thing that's important is just staying on top of it frequently. Some people think that it's okay, I build a financial model and then it somehow ticks a box and then it goes in a drawer and I don't look at it again for 12 months. And that's kind of a pitfall that I see oftentimes too, is they're living, breathing documents. As your business evolves, as you change things, you too should be kind of updating that financial model to reflect those changes. And you should be using it as a tool to kind of measure what you think might happen versus what's in reality. So yeah, that's kind of another important aspect there.
That's why Sturppy being deceptively simple and easy to update, that makes it so powerful in the sense that you don't have any reason not to keep going back to your financial model and tweaking it to reflect the current reality you're facing.
Right, exactly.
So how have senior finance leaders reacted to Sturppy, those that have actually had the benefit of seeing it?
Yeah, I think at the early stages, they kind of had the same reaction that I had to Canva as a Photoshop expert myself, of saying, oh, this isn't robust enough, and you're never going to be able to kind of replace all of this functionality, and kind of meeting some of these kind of niche situations is really tough. But as we've kind of grown the platform, I get more and more kind of LinkedIn DMs and stuff around FP&A and kind of CFO style folks that are kind of knocking on our door and saying, people are continuing to use this. There might be something here. And then sometimes they've had a second conversation with us and said, oh my goodness, you guys have improved this platform so much in such a short time. And we're like, yeah, we're just getting started too. So I think they're slowly coming around to it and seeing kind of some of the benefits of kind of using a tool like Sturppy versus managing a ton of different spreadsheets or trying to kind of maintain it in different places.
Brilliant. And moving on from the technology side to more of the people side of things and your leadership style, who has been your biggest influence on your journey to becoming a founder of a game-changing financial modeling software?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's kind of cheesy. I got to give a lot of credit to my pops, my dad. He's always been he's been a big business leader his entire life and has set a pretty good example on what it is to be a leader. I remember kind of when I was having the conversation with him back in 2019 around, hey, should I leave my super comfortable, high paying consultant job at a big firm and kind of jump out of the nest and do my own thing. And he turned to me and said, do it. Don't be afraid to take chances, especially when you're young. And so he was definitely kind of a big influence in kind of pushing me into the crazy world of startups and kind of getting me started there. So he's definitely been a big influence for me in kind of how I navigate my company as a leader, but also just taking the leap into entrepreneurship in the world of startups.
And I have to say, you show a great deal of resilience to bounce back from your first startup experience, and obviously the learnings from that when you're just starting out, and you're going to fail. We all fail at something at the beginning, right? So how did you manage to regulate your emotions during that time?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I think as startup founders and entrepreneurs, you kind of, your identity in such a way becomes, so much of it becomes the startup or the business that you're building. And so it could be tough. It's kind of a shameful thing to be promoting to the world that you're working on this next big thing. And then one day you kind of wake up and you realize that next big thing isn't going to be a next big thing. And you got to kind of go back to the Thanksgiving's around the corner. You got to sit down at the Thanksgiving dinner table. And when your aunt asks you how things are going, you have to kind of say, not good. And so it can be a tough pill to swallow, but I think that it's gotten more common for founders to be more sharing from like a vulnerable space. And so I've just been motivated by kind of the folks that have come before me in the entrepreneurial space that have failed and said, hey, it's, so long as you're kind of failing forward and learning things and applying those to your next idea, you can still be successful. It's very difficult, and I don't think that there are many super successful founders that kind of struck gold on their first attempt. So I'm a big believer in getting reps in and encouraging people to take the leap into entrepreneurship, because it might not be this time around, but if you keep kind of putting yourself in the game, you'll eventually figure it out and kind of progress things forward. So it was tough kind of sunsetting that business and going back to some of our investors and saying, hey, we failed. I'm sorry, but we're hoping to kind of learn from it. It wasn't for naught. We learned a heck of a lot. And we're going to take those learnings and try things again. So it's tough, but I think the best entrepreneurs are the ones that find a way to kind of persevere and jump back on the horse.
Yeah, I'd say those were formative experiences, even if they weren't pleasant. Yeah, they're rewarding in their own way.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you think is the most important personality trait for success as an entrepreneur?
Man, it kind of goes back to the same thing. You got to be willing to put yourself out there, and it can be uncomfortable. It's funny. I was joking with my girlfriend. I'm not one to post a lot on kind of social media, and I was posting selfies on LinkedIn the other day, and it can feel uncomfortable, like getting yourself out there, putting yourself out and kind of out into the world and saying you're doing this thing, because you don't want to be judged, but you just got to do it. And so I think being fearless in that, getting your name out there is huge. I think there are so many technical or very gifted technical founders working on very cool projects. But at the end of the day, if they're not getting that project or that product into the hands of their potential users, it's just going to stay that. It's going to stay a project and never become a business. So I think the hard part of being an entrepreneurship is not being afraid to put yourself out there, be vulnerable, and get early looks and feedback from those customers or potential customers, because that's really where you'll learn. The product that we first kind of released in early 2021, I keep kind of a picture of it on my desktop, because it looks nothing like the product that Sturppy is today. I mean, it's motivational to go back and look at it and say, oh my goodness, we've come so far. But had we not been willing to kind of put that out there in the early days, we wouldn't be here today. So I think to kind of sum it up, you just got to be, as an entrepreneur, the most important thing to me is being willing to put your product, your business out in front of the public, in front of your potential customers, and not be afraid of what folks might say about the product you're building.
Agreed. You have to have a certain extent, a thick skin, and understand where you're coming from, and that where you are now is not where you're going to be in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. And then in terms of career advice, do you believe that entrepreneurship can be learned? And how would anyone who's thinking of starting actually start the journey if they were interested?
Yeah. Yeah. So for one, I 100% think it can be learned, but how you learn it, I think, is more so trial by fire than learning it from a textbook. In the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, I read every book, I listened to every podcast, I was subscribed to all the newsletters, I was on websites like Indie Hackers and all of these kind of entrepreneurial business style resources. I was consuming all of them, and I saw a post one time, and it was like some entrepreneur, and he kind of made the challenge. He said, it's time to consume less and actually produce and put out more, because that's really where you learn. And so had we not taken the early shots, had I not done kind of the first startup, I wouldn't be where I am today. So again, it's just kind of putting yourself out there is super important.
Thanks, John. And then what's the best piece of career advice you've personally received from someone like a leader or a mentor?
Man, that's a good question. I think just not being afraid to fail. I think it's super important. You read books, going to books like if you read like the Mom Test, which is a super kind of famous early stage entrepreneurial book, getting that customer feedback is super important. But so getting out there, listening to your customers, iterating on that feedback is good. But I always look for trends. I do see a lot of founders in business that one customer comes back and says the automobile should be red, and then they start repainting the automobile red. And if you do that with every single piece of customer feedback or every single kind of interview you do, you're going to have a wacky looking rainbow car. And so I like to try to always listen to feedback from your customers, but look for the trends. And so what I mean by trends is even at the early stages, if you're just getting started, someone gives you a piece of feedback, write that feedback down. And then when someone else gives you another piece of feedback, write that piece of feedback down. And then look at the trends of what the customers are saying and move in that path. Because if you try to just create a new feature for every customer, it's not going to be applicable to kind of a mass audience. You're going to create something a little too niche, and the chances are that whatever you're building isn't going to be kind of applicable to your next customer. So listen to feedback, but look for trends and then act on the trends in that feedback is definitely something that's been rooted on me from kind of some of my mentors, but something that I try to practice diligently.
Thank you, John. That's really powerful. Sparks a few thoughts in me as well, but I'll keep those to myself because this is really valuable to get your time. And then in terms of lessons, what's the single lesson your career has taught you that you think everyone should learn at some point in their life?
The single lesson, oh man, I created TikTok earlier. No, I'm just not on TikTok, but man, some of the folks that I never would have thought folks could grow on TikTok the way they do, but they do. The single lesson, I think the single lesson that I probably learned most, I think it's just got to be being okay with and reframing your failures. So looking at what you might perceive as something that was a failed attempt and thinking about that critically and saying, what can I learn from that and then potentially apply later in life. So, I mean, my first startup was in a completely unrelated space to financial modeling. We were in the supply chain and third-party logistics e-commerce space. But still, some of the things that we did then and some of the things that we learned back then somehow come into everyday life in this startup and can be applied forward. So just not seeing your failures as necessarily failures, but learning opportunities and how you could potentially apply those things moving forward is super important.
Always good to be resilient, as they say. Thank you so much for all your insights. And just on a personal level, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Yeah, so I live in Denver, Colorado for most of the year. So I'm a big skier. So I love to get out into the mountains and go skiing. And then a lot of my family lives on the East Coast down in South Carolina and in Hilton Head on the beach. So when I'm not skiing in the wintertime, I like to go down to the beach in the summertime and do some fishing with my father and my brother. So those are probably my two favorite hobbies. And then just like a daily indulgence that I've just been obsessed with for the past year is the game Wordle. Have you ever heard of Wordle? Yeah, so it's a little word game. New York Times actually bought it, but it's a simple kind of Scrabble-like word game that you can play every day. So I always play Wordle, and I send my results to my mom and my brother and my girlfriend, and it's always a competition every morning of who won Wordle for the day. So that's another kind of fun hobby that has a little competition built in. It's fun to play with the friends and family.
Brilliant. Thanks for the tip. I'll definitely check it out. Wordle. Thank you. And in terms of education, what are 3 books you'd recommend to your listeners and why?
Okay, 3 books. I can think of 2 for sure. So one of my favorite books, kind of around business and just entrepreneurship, is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Shoe Dog is the story of Phil Knight creating Nike, the shoe company. And it's awesome. Like, talk about someone who faked it till he made it in building Nike and kind of the innovations there. And so it's just a feel good story. And Nike being such a massive company in the States and abroad is a really good story. So I'd recommend that one. And then another one that I read recently that I thought was really good was a book called Burn Rate. And Burn Rate is written by the founder of one of the first kind of direct-to-consumer men's pants companies, Bonobos. So they were really big. They were a startup here in the United States. They ended up selling to Walmart for around $300 million. And he shares extremely vulnerably about his kind of experience being a founder and him dealing with being schizophrenic and dealing with anxiety. And it was just really powerful because you just don't hear about these kind of titans of industries or folks that have built these massive, thriving startups that deal with mental health issues. And he just kind of tells his whole story. And so I really enjoyed that one. That one just came out a couple of months ago. But that's a good read for sure for 2022. As far as the third book, I kind of mentioned it. If you're just getting started in the world of business and entrepreneurship, and you're looking to kind of gauge and get early feedback and kind of test new ideas, The Mom Test is a great, super short read. You can probably read it in a day or two. I think it's maybe even like 100 pages or so, but it's a really good book about talking to early customers and how to remove kind of some of that bias when talking to your customers to kind of validate new potential business ideas. So I really like that one as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. Another 3 to add to my reading list. So really appreciate that. And in terms of projects, do you have anything that you're working on currently right now that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so Sturppy is our main focus right now. So Sturppy is great if you're an entrepreneur looking to build an investor-ready financial model. So you can find it at sturppy.com. That's STURPPY. And so we're continuing to add to the product. We're making it stronger and better every day. One kind of fun anecdote that gets asked a lot around Sturppy, that, and if you don't mind, I'll go on a small tangent, is where the name comes from. So people are like, what is that name, Sturppy? And you got to think about it from the context that my co-founder is from Italy. And so you got to put on a nice thick Italian accent and say Sturppy. And what it really comes from is that in Italy, they say to do things in a startup-y way. And so to do something kind of lean and mean is a startup-y way. And so he took startup-y and turned it into a Sturppy. So that's where our name comes from. And we get asked about it all the time. And it's just kind of a fun back. We thought about it at the early stages of changing it. We said, what? No, that's who we are. It's kind of rooted in our team. And so we always kept it. But yeah, we get asked quite a bit of where that name comes from.
That's a wonderful story, actually. And so the correct pronunciation of Sturppy is Sturppy.
Yeah, nailed it. Nailed it.
Thank you. Thanks, John. It's been a complete pleasure just one final question. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active. I would say of all the social medias, I'm active on LinkedIn. So you can just search my name, John Ladaga, on LinkedIn, and I will show up. And I'm John, JJ _ Ladaga on Twitter. But if you want kind of a list of all my socials, if you just go to sturppy.com/about, you can kind of find all my social channels there. We've also got a YouTube channel kind of structured around early stage finance and kind of financial tips there. So I have fun trying to build some content out on that as well.
Thank you, John. This was Business Breaks, and you've been listening to John Ladaga and Dante Healy. Thank you, everyone. Cheers. This podcast shares experiences and insights gained from business, IT, and digital finance. Hosted by two leaders who have made the leap themselves, this show is dedicated to helping listeners think differently about their career aspirations.